CBS Young and the Restless spoilers. After the tense Jabot meeting finally broke apart, Diane Jenkins Abbott did not leave with relief so much as with a tight, restless ache that refused to settle. The boardroom had been full of measured voices and polished restraint, but she could still feel the underlying panic that lived beneath the surface. The silent awareness that Jabot's stability was being tested by forces that did not play fair. She needed air, space, something quiet enough to hear her own thoughts again, so she drifted toward the Genoa city garden, hoping the winter calm and trimmed hedges might offer a temporary illusion of peace. The garden had always been a strange kind of refuge in this town, a place that looked serene precisely because it hid so much. And Diane moved through it with the uneasy awareness that tranquility here was often staged. She rounded a bend and slowed, almost instinctively, because she saw movement in a shadowed corner that did not belong to the emptiness of the path. There, partially shielded by foliage and the angle of a stone arch, Nikki Newman and Jack Abbott stood close enough that it did not read as coincidence. Their body language softened and intimate in a way that made Diane's chest tighten before her mind could even assign meaning to it. It was not that she witnessed anything overt, no dramatic embrace or undeniable betrayal, but that was almost worse, because subtlety is where secrets live. And the quiet familiarity between them carried the faint scent of something carefully contained. A wave of suspicion surged through Diane so quickly it felt humiliating, like an old reflex she thought she had outgrown. She told herself she had earned her place beside Jack, that she had rebuilt trust brick by brick, that the past was the past, yet the sight of Nikki with him pulled memories out of her like splinters. Diane could not look at Nikki and Jack without remembering the complicated history that had always hovered between them, the emotional entanglements and old loyalties that never fully dissolved. The way Genoa City could resurrect a decades-old connection in a single glance. And then another thought, sharper and far more dangerous, cut through the jealousy: Victor Newman. Because no memory of Nikki and Jack existed in a vacuum. It always carried Victor's gravity, the man who treated the Abbott family as an adversary by default, who had proven repeatedly that he would weaponize business, romance, and reputation without remorse. Diane's mind raced through Victor's past traps, the schemes he had engineered to destabilize the Abbotts, the attacks that arrived disguised as opportunities. In that instant, Nikki standing close to Jack did not just look like intimacy, looked like a doorway. And Diane had learned the hard way that doors in this town are rarely opened without someone planning to walk through them. She stepped back before either of them could notice her, moving into the deeper shadow of the garden's edge, her heart beating with a mix of anger and fear she did not want to admit she still carried. She told herself she was being rational, that she was not spying out of insecurity, but protecting what she had fought to build. Yet even that justification couldn't fully erase the sting. Diane remained still, listening, trying to capture the shape of their conversation without being seen, because if this was something harmless, she needed to know. And if it was something strategic, something involving Victor, she needed to know even more. Their voices were low, intentionally restrained, the kind of tone people use when they believe privacy is essential. Diane strained to pick up more than fragments, but the garden swallowed sound, leaving her with only glimpses. A pause that felt heavy, a sentence that dissolved before it reached her. And then to words that hooked into her like barbed spline and secret. She couldn't tell which one had been spoken first or who had said them, only that they were there. And in Genoa City, those words rarely belonged to anything innocent. The uncertainty became its own kind of poison. Diane's imagination filled in blanks faster than logic could stop it, conjuring possibilities she didn't want to believe. Was Jack hiding something from her because he thought she wouldn't understand? Was Nikki offering information that Jack needed but didn't want to explain? Was this about protecting Jabot, or was it about protecting Newman interests at Jabott's expense? Diane felt the sharp humiliation of questioning Jack's loyalty and the deeper fear that perhaps she had no choice but to question it. Because too much in this town was built on half-truths presented as necessary sacrifices. She hated how quickly doubt returned, hated how easily the past could rise up and whisper that she would always be the outsider. always the one who had to prove herself while others were trusted by default. Yet she also recognized that ignoring her instincts would be the greater mistake. If Victor was involved in any way, silence could become complicity, and Diane refused to be blindsided again. By the time Nikki and Jack began to drift apart, their conversation fading into a final exchange Diane could not fully hear, Diane's mind had already made its vow. She would find out what that meeting meant, what the plan was, what secret they were keeping, and whether it posed a threat to Jack or to the fragile future they were trying to build. Her promise was not driven purely by jealousy, but by something steadier and more ferocious. The determination to protect her marriage and her life from the kind of manipulation Victor Newman thrived on. Diane had fought too hard to be reduced again to someone standing outside the truth while others shaped her fate. She did not confront Jack in the garden. Not yet. Diane understood that emotion could make her reckless, and recklessness was exactly what enemies exploited. Instead, she waited, gathering herself, rehearsing the questions she would ask and the tone she would use because she needed answers that couldn't be waved away with charm or vague reassurance. When she finally did face Jack, it would not be with accusations that could be dismissed as insecurity, but with direct clarity. Why was Nikki there? Why did it feel secretive? And what, exactly, was being planned? Diane intended to demand an explanation that was complete and honest, not because she wanted to control Jack, but because she refused to let their future be built on omissions that could later become weapons in someone else's hands. In Genoa City, love was never enough on its own. It needed truth as armor, and Diane was prepared to fight for it quietly at first, but relentlessly until the full story behind that hidden conversation finally surfaced. The winter wind rattled the frosted window panes of the Genoa City Athletic Club, but the chill inside the private parlor was entirely of human making. Nikki Newman sat on the edge of the velvet settee, her knuckles white as she clutched her untouched tea. Across from her, Jack Abbott leaned forward, his brow furrowed in a mixture of concern and dread. The air between them was heavy, charged with the unspoken history of decades-long wars and fragile truces. "It's not just business this time, Jack," Nikki said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She glanced over her shoulder, ensuring they were truly alone in the dim corner of the club. "Victor isn't just trying to acquire Jabot. He's trying to dismantle you piece by piece. And the weapon he's using, this AI program, it's evolving into something I don't think even he can fully control." Jack's eyes darkened. He had felt the tremors at Jabot for weeks. Supply chains mysteriously disrupted, proprietary formulas leaking onto the dark web, digital firewalls crumbling under assaults that felt too precise to be human. "I knew he was behind the cyber attacks," Jack murmured, the realization settling in his gut like lead. "But I thought it was just another one of his corporate raids." "You're telling me it's more personal?" "It's relentless," Nikki confirmed, her gaze pleading. "He's obsessed, Jack. He sees this AI as the ultimate enforcer, a way to strike without ever leaving the ranch. But that's not the worst of it." She took a shaky breath, the diamonds at her throat catching the low light. "He's not working alone. He's twisting arms, calling in debts that shouldn't exist. He's manipulating Michael Baldwin." Jack recoiled slightly, the name landing like a physical blow. Michael. He's been trying to distance himself from Victor's dirty work for months. He has a conscience, Nikki. "That's exactly why Victor is squeezing him so hard," Nikki insisted. "He knows Michael is vulnerable. He's forcing him to act as a mole inside your legal defense, or Rossetto plant evidence that justifies the AIS findings. Victor wants Michael to be the hand that turns the key, effectively destroying his own career to sink the Abbott legacy." Jack ran a hand through his silver hair, pacing the small space between the table and the fireplace. The cruelty of it was staggering. Victor wasn't just attacking an enemy. He was corrupting a good man to do it. Michael Baldwin, who had fought so hard for redemption, was being dragged back into the mud by the one man he couldn't easily refuse. "He's tearing Michael apart," Jack said, his voice thick with anger. "Michael is caught between his loyalty to the Newmans and his own soul. If he caves, if he actually goes through with whatever Victor is demanding, Jabba won't stand a chance. Unbeknownst to them, the heavy oak door to the parlor was cracked open just an inch. Diane Jenkins stood in the shadows of the hallway, her hand frozen on the brass handle. She had come to find Jack to deliver news about a minor victory in PR, but the conversation she had stumbled upon was worth more than any press release. She pressed closer, her breath held tight in her chest, listening to every syllable. Michael Baldwin. The name echoed in Diane's mind. She knew Michael. She knew the complex web of guilt and loyalty that bound him to Victor. But she also knew his love for Lauren and his desperate need to be seen as a man of the law, not a henchman. Hearing Nikki describe the coercion, Diane realized instantly that Michael was not just a pawn who was the fulcrum. The entire war between the Newman and Abbott dynasties currently rested on the shoulders of one conflict-head lawyer. Inside the room, Jack stopped pacing. "Does Michael know you're telling me this?" "No," Nikki said, shaking her head. "And if Victor finds out, I don't know what he'll do. But I couldn't sit by and watch him destroy you, Jack. Not after everything. I see the toll it's taking on Michael, too. I saw him at the office yesterday. He looked haunted. He's terrified of the consequences if he betrays Victor, but he's sickened by what he's being asked to do." Diane stepped back from the door, her mind racing. The intelligence was a game changer. Victor's armor had a crack, and that crack was Michael's morality. If Michael was truly struggling, truly on the brink of snapping under the pressure, he wasn't just a threat, was an opportunity. Inside the parlor, the gravity of the situation pressed down on Jack. He sat back down, covering Nikki's hand with his own. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You've taken a huge risk coming here, but you've given me a fighting chance. If Michael is wavering, maybe he can be saved. Maybe he can be turned." "Be careful, Jack," Nikki warned, her eyes wet. "Victor is watching everyone. If Michael makes the wrong move, or if he suspects he'll burn everything down just to prove a point." As Nikki gathered her coat to leave, slipping out a side exit to avoid being seen, Jack remained at the table, staring into the dying embers of the fireplace. The revelation had shifted the ground beneath his feet. He wasn't fighting a faceless algorithm anymore. He was fighting for the soul of a man who held the keys to the kingdom. Moments later, the main door opened and Diane swept in. She didn't feign surprise at finding him there. The urgency in her stride told him she was already in motion. "I heard," she said, cutting off his greeting. She closed the door firmly behind her and moved to the table, her expression fierce and calculating. Jack looked up, startled. "You were listening." "I was coming to find you, and I couldn't help it," Diane admitted, pulling out the chair Nikki had just vacated. "Jack, this is it. This is the leverage we've been looking for. Michael Baldwin is the weak link." "He's not a weak link, Diane. He's a man being blackmailed," Jack corrected, though he couldn't deny the strategic implication. "He's a man on the edge," Diane pressed, leaning in. "Victor is overplaying his hand. He thinks he owns Michael, body and soul. But if Michael is truly wrestling with his conscience, as Nikki says, then he is dangerous to Victor. He's a time bomb, or a weapon aimed right at our hearts," Jack countered. "If he decides the cost of defying Victor is too high, he'll execute that plan. He'll plant the files, he'll spy on our defense strategy, and the AI will finish us off. Then we have to make sure he knows there's another way out," Diane said, her voice dropping to a steel whisper. "We have to get to him before he crosses the line of no return. We have to show him that protecting his integrity and his family means standing up to the monster of the ranch." Meanwhile, across town in the sleek, glass-walled office of the Newman Tower, Michael Baldwin stood staring out at the gray skyline. His reflection in the glass looked older, more tired than he felt he had any right to be. On his desk sat a tablet, the screen glowing with the encrypted instructions Victor had sent an hour ago. The file names were innocuous, but the contents were devastating. It was a roadmap to dismantling Jabbett's legal standing from the inside out, using privileged information that only a friend of the Abbotts could access. Michael loosened his tie, feeling the fabric constrict his throat like a noose. He thought of Lauren, of the life they had built away from the darkness of his past. He thought of the look in Jack's eyes the last time they shook hands, a look of trust. Victor demanded loyalty, demanding it as payment for past sins covered up and careers salvaged. But this was different. This wasn't protecting the family. This was an act of war using an unstable technology that Michael didn't fully understand and certainly didn't trust. He picked up the tablet, his finger hovering over the execute command. The pressure was immense, a physical weight on his shoulders. If he refused, Victor's retaliation would be swift and total. He could lose his license, his reputation, perhaps even his freedom if old skeletons were rattled loose. But if he obeyed, he would be the architect of a tragedy, destroying innocent lives to feed one man's ego. Back at the athletic club, the atmosphere shifted from shock to strategy. Jack and Diane moved their conversation to the secluded back patio, the cold air bracing them. "We can't just confront him," Jack said, pacing again. "If we corner Michael, he'll panic. He'll retreat to Victor for protection." "We don't corner him," Diane said, her mind working through the angles. "We offer him a lifeline. We let him know that we know without revealing Nikki as the source. We make him realize that the AI is a threat to everyone, not just Jabot. If that program goes rogue, or if the sect traces the manipulation back to Newman, Michael will be the fall guy. Victor always ensures there's a fall guy." Jack stopped, looking at his wife with a newfound respect for her ruthlessness. She was right. Victor would never go down for this. He would let Michael take the heat. "So we appeal to his self-preservation." "And his guilt," Diane added. "He's struggling, Jack. That means part of him wants to be stopped. We just have to be the ones to stop him." The leak of information from Nikki had raised the stakes to a fever pitch. The abstract threat of Victor's wrath had crystallized into a specific, tactical danger. The AI was the gun, but Michael Baldwin was the finger on the trigger. "We have to move fast," Jack said, checking his watch. "If Victor senses hesitation in Michael, he'll push harder. Or he'll replace him with someone who doesn't have a conscience." Tonight, Diane decided, we invite Michael and Lauren to dinner, a peace offering amidst the corporate chaos. We look him in the eye. We make him choose. Jack nodded slowly, the gravity of the coming confrontation settling over him. The battle lines had been redrawn. It wasn't just about stock prices or market share anymore. It was a battle for the soul of a friend, and the outcome would determine whether the Abbott legacy survived the winter or was buried under the snow. Crushed by the weight of Victor Newman's vengeance,